Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Samantha Vinograd from Brunswick Group and U.S. Senator Chris Murphy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Concordia, thank you so much for having us for this important discussion. Senator, during this UN General Assembly, the 80th, there have been a lot of discussions on how nations are promoting power, whether through multilateralism, through unilateralism, or through military force or other matters. You've taken a different approach and have written and spoken a lot about smart power. What does that mean to you?
Well, Sam, great to be with you, and thanks to Concordia for all the fantastic work you do to try to unite a number of diverse conversations that are happening all around the world and here during this important week. Listen, I mean, I just survey the world and see a set of challenges to the health of the United States and the security of the United States that don't have a military foundation, whether it be climate change, youth poverty bulges, violent extremism, propaganda, corruption. Not every threat that is presented to the United States can be met with a plane or a tank or a gun. And I look at the kind of power portfolios that our adversaries are building, like Russia and China, and you see that they are not repeating the mistake that we have made in the United States, where we are spending upwards of 20 times as much money on conventional military might as we are on smart power. Smart power would be, this set of tools ranging from economic diplomacy to fighting propaganda and corruption to trying to decrease the threat of environmental challenges to the United States. And I think it's just not a coincidence that, as you and I have been working in the national security realm over the last 20 years, America's power has winnowed and the power of our adversaries has grown because they're spending, let's just take propaganda and misinformation as an example. China and Russia are spending a multitude of amounts compared to the United States trying to win the international information war. So, we were already losing this battle, and now with the shutdown of USAID and some of our information capacities at state, we are ceding even more ground. So to me, I want the world's strongest military. I acknowledge that that is a core element of a strategy to protect the United States, but I just think it is an own goal when we are letting these other nations and non-state actors run circles around us on what we sort of traditionally call asymmetric warfare, non-kinetic warfare.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. Obviously, from U.S. administration to U.S. administration, there's going to be different approaches to budgets, to personnel. Under this administration, we have seen a huge degradation in foreign assistance, both from a funding perspective and from a personnel perspective. As the United States is playing less of an active role in delivering assistance abroad, how does that impact U.S. leadership globally and the U.S. ability to project power?
Well, Beijing is obviously celebrating as USAID and our democracy programming is dismantled, because they almost immediately fill in that breach as the United States has gotten out of the business of doing real substantial economic development support in Africa, in particular a lot of our Power Africa initiatives. China is rushing in, and that means that in the contest for instance, critical mineral supplies in Africa, China will have a head start. In a country like Cambodia or Nepal, places where we have fully dismantled or are in the process of fully dismantling our aid operations, China has literally already come in and done a one-for-one substitution and announced it with bravado. These are countries that they want in their ultimate political and economic orbit. I will say, though, that obviously this is a cataclysmic moment in that we have seen the evaporation of these programs, which keep the country safe and keep other parts of the world stable. But we should have made a big investment in these programs when Democrats ran the House and the Senate and the presidency. There were some meager increases to those programmings, but after 4 years of President Biden's tenure, we really hadn't tipped the balance at all, and thus we made the programs maybe a little bit more vulnerable than they needed to be.
I want to switch gears for a second and turn to a really interesting geopolitical dynamic that many of us have been watching. If we go back just a few weeks, a picture of President Xi, President Putin, and Prime Minister Modi went viral at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting and led to a lot of questions about whether China is starting to try or is already replacing the United States as a global leader, and whether on a broader level, countries are not just rebalancing with us, but rebalancing around us, whether it's with China or even European countries that are concerned that the United States might even withdraw more support for NATO. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it is just the reality of the present moment that you cannot rely on this administration. Literally, the policy changes from day to day. And so if you were just trying to manage the next 4 years as a friend or as a ally or ad hoc ally of the United States, you're going to look for other partners because you just don't trust that what Donald Trump says one day will be true the next day. The tariff debate has been a debacle for the United States. Every single day, the tariffs are different. And of course, a country like India says, I mean, can we really bet our economic future on a relationship with the United States? Is there another partner out there that might be able to offer us greater stability? This is a particular problem of the Trump administration, but the instability and inconsistency in foreign policy is always a bug, not a feature of democracy. One of the features of totalitarianism, especially in a stable state like China, is that they can have consistency of foreign policy. So Republicans and Democrats together are going to have to, at some point, sit down and have a conversation to see how we can have more consistency of American foreign policy, of American global economic policy, from administration to administration. This whiplash that is happening inside the Trump administration, but this broader whiplash that's happening from Democratic administration or Republican administration, it's turning our allies away.
Well, there's been a lot of focus, particularly today, but every day at the UN General Assembly, on Ukraine and NATO support for Ukraine, as well as potentially NATO engaging in direct military action against Russian assets. Dating back to the Obama administration, through Trump, through Biden, now through Trump again, there has been a lot of pressure on NATO allies to spend more on their defense. How do you view other NATO members' commitments to European security today? And do you think we're on the precipice of another world war?
Well, I don't think we're on the precipice of another world war, but I do believe this is a moment where Europe has got to get much more serious about their collective defense. There is no guarantee, let's just be candid, that Donald Trump is going to honor the NATO treaty if there was an attack on European soil. I hope that is not true. I hope I am wrong about that, but I just think we have to be clear about his lack of commitment to our alliance structure. And so I've been very supportive of Europe, either through the European Union or other structures, starting to do more defense planning together. I think it's also a moment for us, in reference to our first conversation, to really understand what the full suite of national security tools is. I do think we make a mistake when we assess the totality of Europe's contribution to defense in evaluating only the amount of money that they put into military hardware. There actually are a lot of countries in Europe, for instance, that are putting real money into fighting Russian propaganda. That's as effective a tool on most days as is hard power. So I want Europe to step up. I think they're going to have to do some additional planning on their own, just to be ready for a potential inevitability that Trump doesn't make good on the NATO promise. But I want to make sure that we're looking at their national security toolkit in a comprehensive way.
Turning to technology,
yeah,
which has been on the agenda for this UN General Assembly, AI. Governments have been taking a series of steps to regulate AI. Private citizens, governments, nonprofits all recognize the benefits that it can present. Are governments doing enough to regulate AI overall? And is there a level of international cooperation that's needed to regulate it further?
So I think the simple answer to that question, Sam, is no. This is obviously a world-changing technology, but it is also potentially a civilization-destroying technology. The amount of job loss that could occur in a very short amount of time once we cross the precipice of what they call AGI, this is human-like intelligence, could be tremendously and rapidly destabilizing for economies. And so we have to manage that transition of job loss. There's also a spiritual component to outsourcing so many core human functions, conversation, friendship, discovery, creation, to robots, to machines. And that can also lead to political instability as well. There's this narrative in the United States that if we regulate artificial intelligence here too toughly, that will be a win for the Chinese and the Chinese will be the beneficiary. Well, let's just be clear. China is not turning their citizens into guinea pigs for their AI companies. They actually regulate AI. They are careful about how they are deploying AI into their population. They're frankly rooting for the United States to not regulate AI and for AI to build upon the destruction, the social destruction that has already happened in this country due to social media, and see it supersized here. So I think this is a moment where the United States has to join with Europe and follow a lot of Europe's lead in protecting both jobs and families and children from the rough edges of AI. And I think that's actually smart policy when it comes to the overall defense of our economy and our culture, because China is not doing this in a way that shows they don't understand the potential pitfalls of unregulated artificial intelligence.
Is there room for cooperation with China on this?
Well, that's a great question, right? And I think it is worth remembering that there have been these opportunities, sometimes industry to industry, to cooperate with China. Bioengineering is an example of some unwritten protocols that decades ago were tacitly agreed to, mainly through sort of track two conversations between industry that have benefited the world in terms of protections from some of the most immoral kinds of human cloning and human gene reproduction. So I think we shouldn't give up on the potential for the United States and China to have either the government-to-government level or the industry-to-industry level some important conversations. That's just not going to happen in the Trump administration right now. They have signaled very clearly that they do not want to have any restrictions on AI, that their priority is putting the artificial intelligence industry's profits before the safety of our country. And it may be too late if those conversations have to wait for another 3.5 years.
Let me end with where I started, which is on smart power. President Trump, the Trump administration, has had a different view on how deeply to invest financially and otherwise in the United Nations and other multilateral bodies. The White House issued a fact sheet late yesterday, early today, talking about sovereignty versus multilateralism. Do you think it's possible for the United States to effectively project smart power abroad if it is less invested in multilateral institutions like the UN?
I think the UN, remains critical. The UN has a legitimacy in many parts of the world that the United States or ad hoc organizations that we may construct does not have. So the UN remains an incredibly vital partner. But as we close out, I just do think it's important to, we have these very normal conversations here about the Trump administration. What's their thoughts on Ukraine, right? What's their policy to the UN? What do we say about their destruction of USAID? The reality is that American foreign policy now is just as much about what enriches Donald Trump and his family as it is about what protects this country. That's the real extraordinary story of American foreign policy for the first 6 months of the second Trump administration, is the way in which he has gone into the Middle East and asked for things for himself, a personal luxury jet, asked for investments in his businesses. The meme coin itself is just an open sewer of corruption in which any foreign oligarch, any foreign leader, any foreign government can be secretly funneling money to this president. Obviously, the story was told very quickly to countries that if they did business in the early days with Elon Musk and Starlink, they'd have a better potential deal on tariffs. I'm here for the conversation about how we sort of save our commitment to the UN, how we try to protect against some of the worst things that will happen to smart power. But I do think it's important for us to acknowledge the reality, and the reality of American foreign policy today is corruption. And that is a stain that is going to be hard to wash away. from America's national security foundations if we don't collectively, Republicans and Democrats, speak up about it very loudly and right now.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.